Greene and Comer have already met with Vivek Ramaswamy and the DOGE team. They're going to be working hand in hand to find every wasted penny. But some Democrats are not convinced that this is something that needs to be done. They don't think we have a spending problem, but instead a revenue problem. They say the solution is to raise taxes on the rich. Why is government efficiency a bad thing?
Look, he's talking about doing $2 trillion cuts, financing it with things like taking away people's Social Security in order to be able to do more giveaways for billionaires.
Right now, the government is spending about $2 trillion more than it's taking in tax revenue. So where do you propose the cuts start?
Well, I propose that billionaires give back the money that they are now taking in giant tax cuts.
But John, you could take all the money of all the billionaires in this country and still only cut about $6 trillion off the debt, which is over $36 trillion right now. John?
Is your GOP colleague, Marjorie Taylor Greene, in position to help Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy's goal of slashing federal spending and regulations? Because isn't Congress in charge of controlling the purse strings anyway?
Yeah, I mean, look, the only maybe positive news of Marjorie Taylor Greene leading anything is that she's the most incompetent member of Congress, the most unserious member of Congress. And so she will be completely ineffective in doing anything. She certainly is as a member of the Oversight Committee, which I serve with her on. And I'll tell you, you may know this, Alex, I'm the only member of Congress that sits on the exact same 3 committees as her. So I spend more time with her in committees than anybody else in Congress. There couldn't be anybody worse. And so putting her in charge of anything is such a joke, especially a committee that whose whole intention is essentially to damage the government, to damage services, to ensure that people that are dependent on government services don't receive them. And I know that Marjorie, I'm sure, is just very excited about actually hurting people. It's really unfortunate this is happening, but I'm not too worried about somebody that can barely legislate being put in charge of anything.
Okay, but for the sake of legislation, would you be willing to make it a 4th and join that subcommittee?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about it, about joining that committee. We're going to have Democrats on that committee, but it certainly ain't going to be to help Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's going to be to push back on all of her BS, on all of the craziness that Donald Trump is going to try to impose on our federal agencies. And
AOC, which she captures here. Absolute dying at those two now getting assigned the privilege of working with MTG. That is actually hilarious. Enjoy, fellas. Very prestigious post you have there.
I mean, she's so good at what she says and how she handles it, AOC. She says it all. I mean, they almost deserve each other if they were not talking about serious issues, but they're not in a serious enough position for us to panic.
World's richest person dealing with QAnon lady.
Right. And one of the most celebrated deniers of the fact she doesn't even agree the sun shines. So the conversation they have, we should make a reality show of Elon talking with MTG. I mean, imagine that conversation. And it is furtherance, though, of how they've made a mockery of government. I think that no one has really dived into it in a deep enough way that this whole Trump into the inaugural area or would it pre him taking office, how he has mocked the whole United States government system.
At 4 or 5%. But the reason that it doesn't grow at 4 or 5% is in that one single chart. It is impossible to be able to live up to your economic potential when you have this burden on your neck. So I think the real opportunity for DOGE is to basically do whatever it needs to do using the law to wipe as many of these regulations off the books. We are better cutting them all to zero and then finding the ones we really need and then repassing those than we are going at this piecemeal. And there's some incredible ideas, by the way, that this creates. Nick, I don't know if you can find this tweet, but DOGE asked what people think of the IRS. And there was an enormous amount of activity that essentially said, give us a flat tax and wipe out the tax code. And people were very flexible in the amount of tax that they were willing to pay. But could you imagine the simplification in the tax code and the implications of that? I was in Singapore, by the way, 10 days ago when I started my trip. Nick, beep out the name of the person I'm about to say, but I had a long meeting with who, is there. And I was asking him the complexity of dealing with taxes. He's like, what do you mean? We pay a very simple tax system. There's no capital gains in Singapore. And so as a result, our filing requirements are de minimisly small. But as a result, people like him, meaning great entrepreneurs, can spend all their time thinking about what to build. Not
tax optimization.
Exactly. Or how to account for it. So could you imagine if these guys basically use DOGE as a mechanism to shrink the tax code, create a flat tax potentially? I know that has to be passed by Congress. I understand that. But the idea of just cutting this all the way down and then finding through that process what you actually need, I think can find America 100, 200 basis points of GDP growth. It could be an economic renaissance.
I mean, just to build on that, cutting all the regulations to zero, you might throw out some babies in the bathwater. So why not put a clock on them and just say, whenever this was enacted, plus 5 years and then it rolls off, or plus 2 years, whatever number of months, and then you could have them, Chamath, rolling off every month.
I think that's a good idea, but it has to be
quarterly.
I think that's a good idea, but Jake, I think you first have to cancel all these regulations and then say whatever we need, we will reenact. To your point, on a 5-year shot clock that then has to be renewed in a new congressional period. And I think that that's extremely healthy.
The city of Oakland's finances are really in a world of trouble, so much so that in a draft report, finance staffers talked about Oakland being on the verge of bankruptcy. That report has since been rewritten, and references to Chapter 9 bankruptcy have been removed.
Yeah, but that sure doesn't change the fact that Oakland must close a projected $115 million deficit before next June. The city council was briefed today, and KRON 4's Dan Kerman has details.
The city of Oakland is on the brink of fiscal collapse unless the city council acts fast. Tuesday, the city's finance team told council members if they continue spending at the current rate, the city will end this fiscal year in June of 2025 with a deficit of nearly $115 million and risk insolvency. Closing the gap won't be easy.
Reductions in our public safety budgets are now unavoidable to effectively address the current year shortfall.
Police and fire services are on the chopping block because they're responsible for most of the overspending, with the police department projected to overspend its budget by $51 million and the fire department projected to overspend its budget by $34 million. OPD Chief Floyd Mitchell told the city's finance committee earlier in the day they're already taking steps to address the overtime budget.
We implemented measures to really pull back all of our discretionary or special assignment overtimes. Other than that officers are, staying late for a specific assignment.
How cuts to police and fire will impact public safety are unclear.
In tonight with a live shot of Oakland where the city is looking to make some severe cuts to balance its budget.
Finance department sounded the alarm on Friday, saying balance the budget now or declare a fiscal emergency. Officials say any reductions will have to be done soon and could mean laying off police officers and browning out fire stations.
Dahlin reports on the options on the table.
Oakland is facing a deficit of $93 million for this fiscal year alone. Since public safety takes up a majority of the budget, experts say any kind of cut will likely involve police and fire. Much like an emergency, Oakland's finance department calling for urgent solutions to close the deficit. The city admits it's already spending money from its emergency reserves.
To cut already shortened police department makes absolutely no sense. And to cut the fire department means absolutely no sense.
Tahira Hodge worries about possible cuts to police and fire. She and her family evacuated from their home last month in the Keller fire. She credits the fire department for saving her neighborhood.
I looked out and I saw all the smoke and there was some fire in the trees, and I was like, oh my gosh.
In a contingency budget plan released in June, the city talked about reducing the police force down to around 600 officers. Right now, the city has roughly 670 officers. Oakland had 613 officers back in 2013, so 600 would make it the smallest force in years. The contingency plan would also brown out a handful of fire stations, freeze positions across city departments, and reduce hours at rec centers, libraries, and senior centers.
My priority is public safety and a clean city. I need the police and the fire department to respond.
Councilman Noel Gallo and others have warned Mayor Sheng Tao and her allies about this financial mess back in June. The current budget depends on selling the Coliseum, but the city has not received money from the deal.
At the end of the day, we're going to have to negotiate with the unions. We got to make some reductions. We may have to lay some people off.
He says cuts alone won't be enough. They need concessions from the unions.
Crime numbers were down, and so that restores positivity for people to want to come and shop in Oakland, do business in Oakland.
Business owners and residents worry any cuts will derail progress made on public safety.
Having safety is number one, and you have to, because if not, businesses will close.
We need the firemen, we need the cops, because it's too much crime in Oakland.
Residents like Tahira admit any solutions will be painful.
They need to figure out something else because the safety of everyone in Oakland is on the line.
The mayor has been recalled and will be gone after December 5th. The city council will be meeting on Tuesday to talk about how to solve this budget crisis.
And once they balance the budget for this year, then they have to balance the budget for the next 2 fiscal years. City officials estimate they've got a $120 million structural deficit from 2025 to 2027.
Wow. Tonight, a $10 million payment is past due, and the city of Oakland has yet to receive its money from the African American Sports and Entertainment Group for the sale of the Coliseum.
New at 10, KTV's Crystal Bailey spoke with the man in charge of the entertainment organization about why the deal could now be on hold.
The sale of the Oakland Coliseum is not so simple. The African American Sports and Entertainment Group, or AASEG, says it's trying to buy the Coliseum to develop the site, which means purchasing the A's half for $125 million and the city of Oakland's half for another $125 million. The group, though, is late on a $10 million non-refundable payment to Oakland. The city says the group provided evidence that the funds were in an escrow account in October, but the payment, due November 7th, was never made to the city. Ray Bobbitt with AASEG says that's because the group needs the Alameda County Board of Supervisors to vote in its favor on the other half of the deal.
What we're looking for is the approval from the county to allow for us to step into the shoes of the A's.
Bobbitt says if the group does not own both halves of the Coliseum, it would be nearly impossible to develop the site. Simultaneously, Alameda County is dealing with a lawsuit filed by nonprofit Communities for a Better Environment, which could jeopardize the sale of the A's half. The lawsuit says the county and the A's did not follow a state law governing how public land is sold. In a statement from Councilmember Janani Ramachandran, she expresses her concern around the sale, saying, "At a time when our budget is in an especially precarious position, this non-payment is a blow to public trust." She goes on to say, "It was an irresponsible mistake to depend on the proposed Coliseum sale, a highly complicated real estate deal relying on so many variables outside of our control, to plug holes in our budget deficit."
We understand the caution, but at the end of the day, we are literally 1 or 2 meetings away from completing this process, so we're really excited about it.
Because when you look at the salaries of some of the top officials in this city, what you can see is that there's plenty of room to make cuts and to hire more police, right? If you really want to, okay? Because look at these salaries. Richard Lunar, the deputy city administrator, this guy makes $400,000. $400,000. The assistant city administrator, $300,000. The chief of police, $300,000. Director of public works, $300,000. The fire chief, $300,000. All of these people that are running the city, I mean, we're talking about 100 employees. They all make over $200,000 a year. How many police officers could you hire if you cut every single last one of these city officials, if you cut their salaries in half? If you cut their salaries in half, how many police officers could you hire? I guarantee you can hire a lot, right? Which means you would need less overtime because you have more people, more police officers working a regular salary, right? There's less need for overtime, right? But instead of cutting their own salaries, they want to cut essential goods and services while they make almost $500,000 a year to mismanage the city, right? Again, this is insanity. They should be cutting their own salaries first. Cut your own salary first before you start cutting back from the public safety that the city needs, because cutting back public safety is only going to make the problem worse. The reason why the problem exists is because of the fact that crime is out of control. It's because of defund the police. It's because of mismanagement of the budget. That's the problem. When you run your tax base out of the city, right? People don't want to operate there. People don't want to live there. Yeah, you lose tax revenues. And then on top of that, you need more police in order to deal with the crime. You got to pay more money, but you got less tax revenues to afford it. But again, the people who are running the city are getting paid. They're getting rich. Getting rich. This is progressive governance, guys. Progressive governance. Again, this is not something that is an anecdote. It's not. It's not. When we talk about Kamala Harris's campaign and the fact that they raised over $1 billion and they still ended up $20 million in debt, and you look at the things that she paid for, that her campaign paid for, and the ultimate result of her campaign, which is a landslide loss to President Trump, it shows you that these people have no clue whatsoever how to manage money.